have issues with their weight and their weight starts to increase, this also increases the risk of diabetes. And I'm going to go into, in a very nerdy but straightforward way, why that's the case. All right. So while I have you here with me, we're going to go over the background of type 2 diabetes and struggles with weight. I'm going to go over behavior change and how to approach that. And my favorite part, solution, right? Because we know that there's a great concern about these two entities, but we want to know what to do about it. We want to feel empowered by the end of the talk, and that's one of my missions, okay? So solutions in regards to nutrition, stress management, and physical activity. It's always surprising to me how many of us maintain so many angles of our life, our careers, our bills, our mortgage, family, friends, but we neglect the most important person, which is ourselves. And because of that, then we start having struggles with our health. All right, so the background of type 2 diabetes and the struggles with weight. So let's take a look at what's happening around the world in regards to diabetes. We're not alone. So every country has millions of people affected by diabetes. As of 2017, 425 million people around the world are struggling with diabetes. And it's said that this is going to increase by 48% by the year 2045 to about 629 million. Okay? And the worst part is the generation is just getting younger. Okay, in my personal experience, I'm an adult endocrinologist. The youngest type 2 diabetic that I treated was 18. I have colleagues that are endocrinologists, pediatric, and they're seeing children of the age of 8 with borderline diabetes. Which means by the time they're a teenager and maybe in their early 20s, already they have a disease that was prevalent more in the older generation. Okay? So something has to get done. And on top of that, it's expensive. If you look here at this graph, in 2006, it was about $232 billion. And now, in 2017, we're at $727 billion worldwide, just on diabetes. So let's take a closer look at home, okay? How are we doing here in the US? So the first thing that I do want to say, when you see the maps of the CDC, and if it looks red, it's bad. Red is not a good color to look at the maps. Up there on the top, here, we can see this is the progression of the prevalence of obesity from 1994 to 2015. We can see when it's in that kind of yellow or cream color, the prevalence was about 14%. And obesity would be marked as a BMI over 30. And now in 2015, it takes time for the CDC to collect data, we're over 26% of the population. Okay? And in the bottom, here, we see the diabetes. Notice how they look kind of identical, right? So that also has increased. This is how I look every night. Since I was 4, I wanted to be a doctor, okay? I feel a sense of responsibility, not only for patients or clients, but just for the whole community to improve this problem, okay? So I always think, how can this be better? How can people get more educated? How can we start to get this word out there? Because we can. The beauty about diabetes and struggles with weight is that once we start doing the right things, things reverse. Unlike other types of diseases, when it's there's nothing you can do about it. But in this case, we can. This is one of my favorite quotes from the co-founder of Uber. Every problem has a solution. You just have to be creative enough to find it. Okay? But before trying to figure out a solution, we need to understand the situation, right? If we're having an issue, we need to understand it, kind of, really dig into the details and see what areas need improvement. So let's get nerdy, okay? I say that the human body is like an organic robot. So a robot is driven by codes. We have our smartphones, we have our laptops, but our body is driven by hormones. So diabetes, at the root cause, there is a hormone that's having a problem with communication with the cell, and that's insulin. Insulin's job is quite simple. He just has to open the door of the cell, and then the nutrients can come in. And that's what we see here. So in diabetes, this is just an electron microscope view, just to orient you a little bit. Here, that's the wall of the cell. We have there on the left side that little purple circle attaching to a receptor. Right next to it, you see how there's like a little door that just opened, and we have the glucose molecules coming in to the cell. So that's what's supposed to happen naturally, because our cells need that glucose. They need that energy to work well. On the other side, we have insulin doing its job. It attaches to the receptor, but the cell doesn't open its door. There's a level of insulin resistance, okay? So since we're all scientists here today, we're going to try to figure out what's causing that insulin resistance. Yes, genetics. Genetics do play a part. Just because if your parents have type 2 diabetes, it does put you at a higher risk. So for instance, my mother has type 2 diabetes and my father has borderline diabetes. So I am at a higher risk for diabetes than people that don't have that genetic link. Age also increases the risk of type 2 diabetes as we get older. But as I said earlier in the presentation, this doesn't hold truth anymore. Unfortunately, the population is getting younger. But the most important thing is lifestyle. We can't choose our family. We can't choose our genes. You definitely cannot stop the aging process. But you can change the way that you live your life. Stress. How many of us suffer from stress? Right. If you didn't raise your hand, you're lying. Right. Exactly. I've actually found when I ask this question, and someone says, "Oh, I'm not stressed." Those are the most stressed people. They are. And they're stressed because they don't even know that they're stressed. So stress, why? Again, we're organic robots, so everything that we do has a hormone behind it. When you feel happy, that's a hormone. When you feel hungry, that's a hormone. When you're stressed, that's cortisol. Cortisol increases blood sugar, increases weight. So we want to make sure, and I am going to touch on this, the presentation would not be complete if I don't at least give you some tips on how to control stress. Food. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's anything that you can take from today's talk, food is at the source of many of the diseases we're seeing in healthcare today. We need to be extra careful with what we introduce into this beautiful body that does so many things for you every single day without you even asking. Right now, your heart's beating. Your intestines are digesting the food that you ate. Your lungs are breathing. They're exchanging gases right now. So you're hearing, right? So all of these things are naturally happening. And we need to make sure that we're feeding this beautiful body great food, okay? 35% of the cancers that we see today are directly linked to diet. 35%. Which means that we can save 35% of patients that are struggling with cancer just by changing the way that they eat. So foods that are high in fat, not all fats are created equal. So we have fat, let's say, that's coming from an avocado or almonds or extra virgin olive oil. Beautiful. That's great fat. Actually decreases body inflammation, helps your brain, versus fat that's coming from processed meats like bacon or any other kind of processed meat. We have a bacon lover over there. Or French fries, chips, all these types of fats, in moderation. Lack of physical activity. So, do you think that the muscles and bones that you have are there for accessory? They're not, because you're not seeing them. So they're there for you to use it. So that's another thing we're going to get into, how to actually build the habit of physical activity, which is a tough one. And finally, sleep. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. You didn't do that when I said food or stress or sleep. So can anyone tell me how many hours of sleep they think we should be getting a night? 8. I heard 8. Yes, 8. Correct. So we don't sleep 8 hours. It's a problem. Yeah, because exactly, it's a big problem. Because this, not only does it spike your blood sugar and it decreases the metabolism, but it also increases hunger hormones. So you're craving, right? So sometimes when we don't sleep well, all of a sudden it's like chocolate cake, pizza, French fries. In your mind, all of these things are just coming out. It's not your fault, it's the hunger hormone ghrelin that's making you do that, okay? So sleep is really important. We all have our nice gadgets, iPads. I have to say this is the most difficult thing for me to do. I have clients that are 65 in their 70s. To take an iPad away from them is like saying, whatever religion they follow doesn't exist. They don't want to let go of the iPad. It's important. You've got to stop the screen time at least an hour before you go to bed. Allow that brain to detox. Allow that body to do what it needs to do while you're resting. Okay, so sleep is really important. But notice that the risk factors of diabetes are the same for struggles with weight. So genetics, like I said, we can't choose our family, and we can't choose getting younger or older, but you can choose the way that you live your life. Good. So what do these two health problems have in common? They can improve with targeting behavior change. Okay? Because they are health problems that are triggered by behavior. And if we change the behavior, we're changing the habits of the individual, and then by default, the person improves. So how do we do that? Because that's easier said than done. Whatever age you have in the present time, it took you decades to build these behaviors. But you could definitely mold them and change them. So how do we do that? There's a term called neuroplasticity. Has anyone ever heard that term before? Yeah? So neuroplasticity is just a fancy word for the brain to build a new circuit. You see, our brain works by electricity, and it works by connection. So the more that you repeat a behavior, the stronger that circuit becomes. Before, we thought that after the human brain developed after childhood, it couldn't change. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? But that's not correct, okay? We can. We can definitely change the way the brain works if we're intentional about it. We repeat the behavior, and it builds now a new circuit in the brain. And we can build new behaviors with food. We can build new behaviors with our physical activity. And most importantly, we don't ever want to focus on the results. The weight loss industry is $66 billion, okay? A lot of people go on all kinds of diets, hoping just to get to where they want to get. Everyone wants to feel good. Everyone wants to have energy. And unfortunately, sometimes they follow diets to get this. The weight loss industry lives off this area over here, the result. follow this diet for 30 days and you'll lose 30 pounds. They're focused on the result. They're not focused on changing the behavior. And that is a setup for failure. Because if you never tap into how that person is thinking, what their behavior is with food, what's really going on, we can do anything for 30 days. Day 31, the person's going to be lost. And then they gain the weight back. And now they feel they were a failure, but they're not the one with the issue. The issue was the diet to start with. Okay? I'm going to pass around something. It's 5 pounds of fat. And I want you all to hold it. I'm going to start from over there, the gentleman over there. The reason why I'm going to show you this you brought your own? Don't worry. The purpose of this is that sometimes people lose 5 pounds and they think that it's a failure. I only lost 5 pounds. And I said, 5 pounds, it's amazing. 5 pounds is great. You're heading in the right direction. Again, because we're conditioned. Yeah. Thank you.
5 pounds?
Yes. That's how I look in my office sometimes. So if you want to lose weight and you lose 5 pounds, please give yourself a pat on the back for that. You did it. You lost 5 pounds. I used to have that in my office, and when kids would come in, they would poke it and throw it on the floor and everything. I'm like, oh, Mr. Squishy's not going to survive the shift. Excellent. All right, so what is it about these behaviors? We're driven by our subconscious 95% of the time. So we've got our conscious mind, which is when we're fully present. When someone tells you a joke or you give a hug to someone that you love, you're fully present in that moment. Or you see your baby or your child or your spouse, and instead of thinking of something bad, you actually think of something good. Those moments you're actually fully present and fully engaged. That's only 5% of the time. But the magic takes place in our subconscious, 95%. This is when, for instance, when you're driving and you reach home and you have no idea how you got there, right? Or you're cleaning the dishes and then you look and all the dishes are clean because your mind is somewhere else. Or if you learned how to ride a bike or roller skates when you were a kid and you haven't gone on a bike for decades, and all of a sudden you get right back on, and all of a sudden your body knows exactly what to do. That's your subconscious. But unfortunately, that's also where our bad habits live. So a lot of us, let's say, would wake up in the morning, have a cup of coffee, out the door, maybe have lunch, maybe not. Dinner time comes, might have dinner with family, and then after that, the craving doesn't stop. And we start snacking, go to bed full, we wake up extra full, and then we don't have breakfast, and the cycle starts all over again. So again, remember, we are creatures, we're organic robots. We've got this circuit in our brain that every morning we feed. But let's say your goal is to start eating breakfast. So you plan ahead, and you say, you know what? I'm going to start preparing porridge or oatmeal the night before, and then heat it up during the week. So over there, you're already starting a new habit. And it seems a little unnatural at first, just because, remember, you're used to this old cassette. I can say that, you know what cassettes are, correct? I said that to a 17-year-old the other time. She's like, what's that? So you have an old cassette playing an old song, but now you want to build a new one, okay? So we can do this. It's definitely doable. It's just you've got to pass that uncomfortable stage where it feels a little unnatural and you feel like it's a lot of work, but it's worth it. So how do we do that? Education. Because if you're educated and your intellect is there, then all of a sudden you understand why you're doing what you're doing, and then you repeat the behavior, and now you've got a new subconscious. Okay? So it's like learning an instrument or learning anything that you weren't necessarily born with. okay? Good. So now my favorite part is solutions. Solutions on what to eat, how to stress manage, and of course, physical activity. Notice how I didn't say exercise. I said physical activity, and there's a difference. All right, food. So food can be a source of longevity, energy, promoting good health, or it can be a source of toxin, okay? As I said, everything that we eat becomes part of us. We need to understand that it's not like we eat the food and all of a sudden it's just out. It stays, it travels everywhere. Your brain feeds off everything that you eat. So we want to make sure that we're very meticulous about what we put into this body. So who's clear on what to eat to lose weight and to be healthy? Who's completely clear on that? Right? Everyone's got their doubts. Right. Confused. Very confused. We're overloaded with information. Ketogenic diet, paleo diet, eat dairy, don't eat dairy, do this, do that, lectins, all kinds of stuff, right? So the person just is very confused. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. And then what happens when things are confusing? Subconscious kicks in. Don't worry, I got you. We're just going to do what we've been doing for all these decades, and we're just fine. So we need to get educated. And when in doubt, we look at science. Okay? We don't, at least a good doctor won't give information or guide their patients or people they're working with based on their personal preference. We have to look at the data, see what's out there, and see what's going to work for that individual. Because what works for one person might not work for the other. So that's another thing we always have to keep in mind. Good. So these cute little things you see up there are little fat cells. So fat is actually the largest endocrine organ. It's very much alive, very much active. There's so many interesting hormones and things that take place inside these little cells is quite fascinating. In my fellowship, I gave a whole talk just on the cell. That's how amazing it is. But what happens is, when we start to stress that little fat cell, when we start to eat food that really is not food, okay? Food is what's coming from Mother Nature, not that. Okay, this is a highly or ultra-processed foods. Does it mean we're never having pizza or French fries? No. Not all pizzas are equal. There's some good quality pizza. And having 1 or 2 slices of pizza with a nice big salad is different than eating the whole pie, okay? So, and we don't do it every day. It's something that's, once in a while. But the problem is when we're continuously, on a weekly basis, not being careful about what we eat, and kind of when we do this mindless eating, that this happens. So we've got those little cute guys over there on the left. So now when the person starts to eat ultra-processed foods, and then let's say genetically they might have a higher risk for gaining weight or for the diabetes, now that cell starts to become larger. And the immune system, who's your army, okay, one of the perfect army, looks at that and says, that doesn't look very good. We have to go check out what's going on over there. And then all of a sudden starts to release inflammation. Inflammation is at the root of many of the diseases we're seeing today. And it's at the root of that resistance. Remember the insulin not being able to get into the cell? These little guys that you see attached up there on the right, they start to scavenge around and you've got all this inflammation in the body. And now insulin is minding his own business, trying to just get into the cell, but it's got all this inflammation around there and it cannot do that. So that's insulin resistance, which is reversible, okay? That's the key. So this is a nice picture I got online. Yeah, I mean, I honestly do feel, and I'm optimistic about this, that with time, this kind of stuff is not going to be allowed anymore, okay? Just like before, doctors used to smoke in the hospitals, right? Or pregnant women used to smoke too. And now we're like, oh my God, I can't believe people did that, right? That's the same thing with this. I think with time, we're getting more educated. We understand, that we really need to take into account what we're putting in. That amount of sugar, any excess amount of sugar on a daily basis, it really stresses the body. Because remember, insulin has that one job, right? Who likes to be overworked? Who likes to be overworked? No one does, right? So insulin doesn't either. So now the pancreas, which is the organ that releases insulin, it starts to release a lot of insulin, because it's trying to fix this problem that the person is drinking, okay? So now the pancreas is forced, and with time it starts to become debilitated and can't really release any more insulin, and then you've got all that resistance taking place. Meanwhile, in a macro level, the person feels tired. They have to take naps. They feel like there's a problem with them, maybe they feel they're depressed. But what's going on is that their body is just not working very efficiently. And unfortunately, this is a cumulative effect. It's not something that you drink in and all of a sudden the person drops dead. It doesn't work like that. It's a slow but steady progress that takes place. What about Diet Coke? Is that? Of course, yeah. Yeah, it's bad. Definitely bad. A lot of controversy with this a few years ago, but I mean, the data's out there. It's that some people want to say, oh, it's okay. It's not okay. It's not. People that drink high amounts of Diet Coke have more cravings because the brain stays waiting for this extra sweet thing that's supposed to come in, and meanwhile, it's just liquid. On top of that, it's hard on the brain. There's links of people that drink high amounts of diet drinks to stroke, to dementia. So I don't know about you guys, but the only organ that I really think is one of the most important is the brain. Right? Because if you've got your brain, you can figure things out, right? You work really hard to build this intellect, so you want to make sure you're preserving it as much as you can. So you're probably thinking, well, what does this woman want me to drink then? And drink soda? The basics, guys. The basics. I'm Spanish. My parents are from Dominican Republic. I've been drinking coffee since I'm 3. Yes. I turned out pretty good, at least I think. So I would never tell anyone not to drink coffee. Okay? But plain coffee, and maybe you put a splash of almond milk, or if you drink 2% milk, is very different than the drinks that local coffee places serve. I'm not going to mention any names, but there are coffees that have 80 grams of sugar. That's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. It shouldn't be the case. It definitely should not be the case. And that's when you're adding syrup and caramel, and you just see the pumps going and going. It's crazy. It's crazy. I'm at fault to go to these local coffee shops and tell them, can I see your container of milk? And they're like, why, ma'am? I want to see the sugar content. You can't, because you're paying for it. So unless there's a huge line, you don't want to be that person. But, if it's just you there, it's okay. I mean, and some of this data is out there also, online as well. You can find it, which is nice. But water. I mean, water is amazing. If you don't like plain water, you can have infused water. You can have sparkling water and add some lime or fresh berries. Okay, so it's once you start to drink your natural beverages, you feel better too. And then let's say you haven't consumed a Diet Coke or soda or juice, let's say, for a while, and all of a sudden you taste it. I guarantee you, the first thing that's going to come up in your mind is, this is way too sweet, right? Because all of a sudden you've detoxed that palate. Good. And, insulin is a storage hormone. He's good at his work as long as, he can get into that cell. It's a storage hormone. So insulin causes weight gain. Of course, if we're eating high amounts of processed foods, now we're in that fat storage part of the graph, versus we want to be more in that fat burning. We want to be more in that efficient area of the graph. So what should we eat, right? We know what to eat less of, or quite frankly, what to avoid. And it's quite liberating when you get to that point in your life where you say, it's not that I can't have it, it's just that I don't want to have it. Okay, that's the difference between forming a lifestyle change than a diet. Because diet says, no, you shouldn't have that. And a lifestyle change says, I really don't want to have it anymore. Okay? Good. So what should we eat? Whole foods. It really is that simple. We're getting back to the basics. Why? Because for the past few decades, it's been really bad. So we gotta try to go back to how life was before. I love this plate. This is actually the Canadian Food Guide. This came out a few weeks ago, and it's absolutely amazing because their recommendation to their people is to eat with a plant focus. If you look, more than half of that plate is plant foods. We've got fruits, vegetables, whole grains, whole wheat pasta. We have quinoa down here, brown rice, okay? And then the nice option is up here where it says eat protein foods. Notice how they didn't say eat a piece of steak or chicken. Eat protein foods. What are different protein foods? Well, you've got beans, you've got chicken, you have nuts, but also notice the emphasis on the quantity. It's small, at least for the steak and the chicken, okay? So and the beverage of choice is water, not milk, okay? It's water. Good. So when I mention plant foods, what do I mean by that? Fruits, look at those beautiful colors, right? Vegetables, nuts, beans, legumes, and whole grains. Okay, so those are plant foods. Basically food that came from Mother Nature. So if we came from Mars, we would be eating rocks and dust, but we don't. Okay? We came from Earth. So Earth, again, gives us the food that we should be consuming. And what about animal products? There's definitely better alternatives, which is fish, poultry. And we want to try to limit red meat, but most definitely we want to avoid processed meat. Why? Because processed meat can increase your chances of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, by 40%. Okay, so that includes ham, hot dogs, bacon, sausage. So does it mean if you have a sausage one day, or if you go to your favorite aunt's house and she prepares some bacon and you eat it, does that mean you're going to get diabetes? No. But it's not. It's more of what you do throughout the week that counts versus what you do once in a while. Okay, and I feel like that's more liberating, because if you allow yourself a space that, let's say you really, really like bacon, and to have it sometimes if you want, but it's more of what you do on a daily basis that counts the most. But you also want to be mindful, because you might say, oh, I'm going to have this today, and you might forget you had that today, and then tomorrow comes and you have it again. So you definitely want to be present with that. And the problem with red meat and processed meat is that it's directly linked to colorectal cancer, okay? Cardiovascular disease, that includes heart disease and stroke, and like I mentioned, it increases your risk of type 2 diabetes. Again, quantity. So does that mean you're never going to have filet mignon? No, okay? But I like to just use the palm as a guide. So if you're going to have a filet mignon, let's say it's your palm size, and you're not going to have it all the time. This is something once in a while, you're in the mood to have it. Versus if you're having it every day, this is where it becomes a problem, okay? Good. So why is it beneficial to eat with a plant focus? When I say plant focus, it just means that you're gravitating towards those legumes, those whole grains, those fruits, those vegetables. These foods have medicinal properties, okay? When you're eating all of these beautiful plant foods, now all of a sudden you have something in your body that can decrease inflammation. Definitely helps with weight loss and weight maintenance. Why? Because they are naturally low in calories. They are also mainly fiber and water. So if you're consuming something that's large in space, but small when it comes to the caloric value, now you're creating a natural caloric deficit. So you see your body needs to burn a certain amount of calories per day to maintain itself. So that includes digestion, that includes moving around, walking, sleeping. So your body needs to burn a certain amount of calories per day. So if all of a sudden now you're eating more with that plant focus, you're creating that caloric deficit, and by nature you're going to start to lose weight. And most importantly, you'll keep the weight off because you're learning a new way of life. It's not like you're learning it just to lose the weight. Remember I said you want to change your behavior. The weight will follow. That's the byproduct of all of your efforts. So now it's easier to maintain that weight off. Perfect. So as we see up here, a calorie is not a calorie. I often hear people say, well, it was only a 100-calorie cookie. I said, yes. It's only a 100-calorie cookie, but what does your body do with that biochemically? And if we're having that 100-calorie cookie every night when you're watching Netflix, we have a problem, okay? And usually one is not just one, it leads to more. So it's what your body does with it. It converts it to sugar, then it goes inside those little cute fat cells, and with time we're storing and storing and storing more of that. You see the theme here, right? This is the importance of understanding why the body reacts the way that it does. That way we can change our behaviors. So we see here we have 400 calories of vegetables, the stomach is nice and full. We have 400 calories of beef, and then we have 400 calories of oil. You see the space is different. You get more for less when it comes to the vegetables. And that nice stretch that the stomach gets now releases a satiety hormone that tells the brain, hey, we're full. We don't really need to eat. Has anyone overate crackers? Yeah, right? Or pasta? Right? So if I have this bottle of water and I put some crackers in there, it's going to dissolve quickly. Versus if I put strawberries or some of the delicious food we had just earlier inside there, it's going to sit there. It's not really going to dissolve that quickly. So you want your body to work to digest the food, because while it's working, it's also burning calories. Versus if you eat just crackers or highly processed foods, you can eat a lot and you really will never feel satiated. Good. Human body is very smart. So as soon as we start to make changes in the way that we're eating and the way that we're behaving, now all of a sudden the body's like, oh, we're in a caloric deficit. Let's start to consume that fat that's causing problems, the one that doesn't let insulin do its work. So it starts to consume the visceral fat. That's the fat that's within the organs. That's the fat that causes inflammation, that causes diabetes, that causes metabolic syndrome, stroke, and all of many of the health problems that we see. Okay, so again, the body can switch and start to shift. You just have to be patient, because this doesn't reflect on the scale. So someone starts, let's say, to change their habits after a week, and they're like, all of this hard work, I didn't lose 1 pound, doc. I'm like, yes, it's okay, but how does your pants feel? Oh, they feel looser. We're good. We're good. We're on the right track, because the body is now consuming the fat that it should, quite frankly, which is the one that can cause trouble. Good. And yes, I'm not making this up. There are a lot of articles out there that show that when we eat with this plant focus, when we're gravitating towards these plant foods, now all of a sudden the person can lose weight, maintain the weight off, diabetes improves tremendously. Okay, it doesn't mean you're eliminating meat or animal products, but it's just that your plate now all of a sudden has a new protagonist. Okay? is no longer that big lump of chicken or big lump of steak. It's more of like, oh, there's diversity within this plate that's going to help my body work better. And it tastes good, too. Good. And, of course, the abundant health benefits that we get from eating like this is amazing. I mean, all of the beautiful colors you see here actually have a purpose inside our body. You have vitamins, minerals, you could also get protein from vegetables. A lot of people are like, well, I'm not going to get enough protein if I'm only eating a little bit of chicken. I said, no, you will, because you're eating beans and you're having nuts and you're also having different types of vegetables. Spinach has protein as well. Quinoa has all 9 essential amino acids. So in summary, you are getting enough protein. There's something called phytonutrients, which I'm fascinated by, because this is actually the immune system of the plant. So when you eat it, now this becomes part of your body. So it decreases depending on the color of the rainbow. This is why they say you should eat your rainbow. It has different properties. So the reds can help protect your heart from cardiovascular disease. The purple can help protect your brain and fight potential cancer cells as well. So again, this is food with purpose, food that can help you improve your health and longevity. Good. Energy. Everyone wants to have energy, right? We all want to be able to not only just get by the day, but actually live the day to our fullest. You're fully present, engaged, doing your job at its best capacity. So these types of foods, again, maintain that blood sugar nicely leveled. When we eat a big bowl of pasta and then you grab the bread and smush it in there, your blood sugar spikes and it drops. Okay, your brain is left with this craze of like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to go into a coma right now. Versus when you eat a complex plate, now your blood sugar maintains nice and leveled. It improves your bowel movement. You should have at least 1 bowel movement per day. Okay, at least 1. Yes. Oh, yeah. And it's a problem when that's not working well, because then you eat and you feel bloated. You're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm 3 months pregnant. And it's a guy. He's saying, I don't know. I've never been pregnant. You got to clean out that system. And this food definitely does that. It pulls all of that out so you can, benefit from feeling nice and light throughout your day. Okay. Plus, your body's getting all the nutrients. If you have a really nice car, are you going to put cheap, gas into it? No. You're going to put the best, right? Super. So the body's the same. We want to make sure we're protecting it. So how to start? So here are some tips. You want to start slow. You don't want to all of a sudden get out of this lecture and say, that's it, I'm doing this. I'm going to start eating whole foods, and you get home and the environment is not helping you in your efforts, okay? So start slow. I mean, you've got time. You want to get it right. You want to set these roots in a way that nothing could present itself in the future, and you'll continue. You'll continue like this. Research recipes. Find, with social media, there's so many people you can follow that actually show different types of recipes. And find a balance that works for you, okay? Only because your best friend lost 30 pounds following something, it doesn't mean that that's necessarily what will work for you. As long as you have, the focus of eating plenty of plant foods that feel right for you, that you don't have any issues, gastrointestinal issues with them, and then whatever else you decide to add, do that at your discretion, what feels right. And it doesn't have to be boring. There's different types of soups and stews that you can cook in bulk. Different types of yogurts. You want to definitely buy plain yogurt. And I guess you probably are aware of this, the amount of yogurts that are out there that have so much sugar. It's horrible. So you want to try to buy plain, and then you add your stuff into it. And oatmeal. Oatmeal in the morning is a great, easy thing to prepare, and you can prepare enough for the rest of the week. Perfect. So now I want to actually move on to emotional health, which is a very important topic because sometimes we eat not because we're hungry.
Right.
Actually, most of the time we eat not because we're hungry. We eat because we had a bad day. We eat because we had a good day. We eat because we had a neutral day. So is it. So there's a relationship that we build with time, with our culture as well. So we have to be aware of that to see what area actually needs improvement. And there's more to us than all of these hormones and biochemical beings. You know, there's definitely what we say the self. Okay, there are things in medicine we cannot explain. But there is this internal energy that's there and everything is kind of flowing nicely. And magical things happen when the person is fully engaged and has this intention to do better. So we have to make sure we're cultivating and paying attention to that. And that we're not neglecting stress. Okay? We will always have stress because that's just the way life is. But it's how you cope with it that really matters. And from a biochemical perspective, when we're chronically stressed, your body and your brain doesn't know the difference if you're running from a tiger or if you have a deadline. Okay? The reaction is the same. So what is the reaction? The brain is like, oh my God, we're stressed. Send a message to the adrenal glands that we need a high amount of cortisol right now because something terrible is happening. I don't know what it is. So now cortisol, which is also, he's very good at his job, he starts to increase the blood sugar because we need more fuel. He starts to make the muscle nice and tense because we might need to run. He starts to pump the blood, the cardiac rhythm, because there's something that's going to happen that we have to run for our life. Meanwhile, you're just stressed sitting in your computer, probably not very happy with what happened earlier today, but your body is continuously feeling this. And imagine decades of that. High blood sugars. Now we're having problems. We have diabetes that starts to manifest. Hypertension. Weight gain. We have triggers of a reward circuit in our brain. You know, when you're having a bad day and all of a sudden that chocolate cake winks at you. Okay? That's the reward circuit. That's the top of the Diabetes, weakened immune system. It's like we've seen that when we're stressed, all of a sudden we get sick. Depression. Okay, we don't feel really good when we're stressed. It's like there's a sense of loss of purpose. Sleep disturbances. Now we're not sleeping well because cortisol is also kind of a stimulant. Sexual dysfunction. Decreased libido as well. And gastrointestinal issues. You know, the person all of a sudden is having problems with their bowels or irritable bowel syndrome. All having to do with an unchecked stress. So what can we do? Remember, there's always a solution. Every problem has a solution. Well, my advice to you is cultivate happiness. What does that mean? How do you cultivate happiness? Happiness is a choice, okay? It's something that if you are conscious on how you're living your life, you'll start to see it happens quite naturally. We always think, I'm going to be happy when I pay the mortgage of my house. I'm going to be happy when I get that job deal. I'm going to be happy, whatever. But really, think about the last time you really wanted something and you got it. Did that really make you happy? Right? So there's always that desire. This is just human nature. We always want more. But don't label that as your ultimate happiness. You can be extremely happy with your current circumstances, okay? And how do we do that? Take time to spend time with yourself, okay? We're always, I have 2 kids, I have a wonderful husband as well, and you know, we're all busy, we're all caught up in our different roles that sometimes we forget to take care of ourselves. Women, we are notorious for this. But if you take the time, even 10 minutes a day, to self-reflect and say, how do I feel? You know, how is my life going? Do I feel at ease? Are there things that maybe I can start to say no to so I can start saying yes to myself a little bit more? And be present. You'll be amazed how happy you can start to feel when you are more engaged, when you're more engaged in what you're doing. So it could be, let's say, talking to a child, or working, or thinking about the new strategy for your business. So if you're fully present, you'll be surprised how happy you could actually feel. And I have this quick thing that I do sometimes when I feel like I'm lost in my thoughts. I just open my ears and I tell myself, just listen to what's going on around you. And if we do that right now, if I shut up, and you don't laugh, we might hear certain things. Maybe the car in the neighborhood, or someone might be talking in the hallway. So it's like all of a sudden, for a few split seconds, you're out of your head and you're liberated from that turmoil. And it works. Less screen time. We're overly connected. You know, if you send an email to someone, you expect that person to get back right away, right? Because we've got our phones. We're constantly distracted. So we want to make sure that we're decreasing the time with the screen, especially when we're with our family and friends. I think we're all guilty of that, sometimes going out to dinner, and you know, we see how people, even grandparents now, they're just on their phone. My in-laws are my friends on Facebook. So it's great, it's amazing, because we are connected with people that say that we cannot see regularly. But we want to make sure we're cultivating our friendships and, you know, the relationships you have with your family when you have them with you, okay? And stop multitasking. This room is mainly women, so ladies, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say this. You're kidding yourself if you say you're a great multitasker, okay? I have to say I'm guilty of that as well. Men are, you know, I say I admire this, that sometimes they're very focused on this one thing. My husband's like, I'm fixing this one thing right now, just leave me alone. And it gets done. It gets done beautifully. Meanwhile, I'm cleaning the dishes, screaming at my dog, did you do your homework? The pot has, you know, soup on there, and I'm thinking I'm really, you know, dominating the scene here, which I'm not. So you want to make sure you're not multitasking. Why? Because that is a trigger for unhappiness. Then you feel overwhelmed. And you're like, I don't know why I feel so overwhelmed. Well, because you're doing so many things all at once. Okay, so take it easy and, you know, tell yourself, if I can maybe just do this one thing now and do it well, and then I'll move on to the next one. And my personal favorite, gratitude. No matter what your circumstances are in life, there's always one thing you can say or you can think of that you can be grateful for. And it is a paradigm shifter, because now all of a sudden, whatever was clouding your mind doesn't have that much importance. Now you're grateful for something. So again, for a few split seconds, you're away from this negative, let's say, storm that's taking place in your mind, and you're detaching yourself to think about what you're grateful for. So I do recommend this the next time you're having a bad day, or you have an argument with a loved one. Just think about one thing you're grateful for, and you'll see how all of a sudden inside, you can't be happy and sad all in that split second. You feel better. Good. Mindfulness. Who's heard about this? Yes. Good. So what mindfulness is, I am driven by science. It's the practice of paying attention on purpose. And you're usually doing it in a form of meditation. So you're sitting in a quiet space, sitting up straight, and you focus on your breathing. Your mind is going to wander, that's normal. And then you bring back your attention to the breathing. So that is the practice. The practice is your mind wanders and you bring yourself back. Your mind will never be completely blank, unless you're enlightened or something. But you know, this is the practice, to kind of put your attention right back to that present moment. And why is that important? Like, why would that help with stress or post-traumatic stress disorder? It also helps maintain the cells young. There's have been studies showing that as well. Why? What's taking place here? Well, the first thing is, this was an interesting study. It actually showed that people that practice mindfulness can build gray matter in their brain. Okay, so our brain with time can start to kind of shrink, and these are the times we now have a hard time remembering things, but this can help with that. And this is free. You could do this in the comfort of your own home. It's nice because now there are guided meditation apps that you can download on your iPad or on your smartphone that can help you kind of guide you through this process. And it makes sense that it also decreases body inflammation. Why? Because cortisol is not coming out, right? And cortisol causes this inflammation. So it all ties in nicely. Okay, now finally, physical activity, which sometimes is the hardest. So let's talk about what you get out of physical activity. We're lucky and blessed to have institutions like the NIH who are conducting studies to see the medicinal properties of physical activity. And the hope is that in the future, doctors will be able to prescribe specific physical activity routines to their patients that's personalized. So let's say the doctor sees Ms. Smith and Tai Chi might be a good option for her, then he'll write that prescription. So that's the hope with this very large study that they're conducting. And telling people, oh, you need to exercise, goes in one ear and comes out the other. So we need to know how. Okay, how do I do that, right? How do you do that? If you know what you're getting out of it. Because your mind, this is the way it works. Okay, what am I going to get out of this? If I go to the gym, your brain loves physical activity. It loves it for multiple reasons. It increases blood flow, okay? So now you've got all this blood pumping into that brain. There's a release of this growth and repair neuron for the neurons called BDNF. I call it like the nurse of the brain because if there's something taking place in the brain that needs some work, it goes and kind of repairs that. It decreases Alzheimer's, which is a very feared disease because once a person has that, there's no turning back, okay? And there's not enough treatments to really fix it. Increases endorphins. Remember, there are neurotransmitters or hormones inside that make us feel good. That's that. Plus, increased motivation. I mean, when you go to the gym and you actually get yourself in there and you come out, you feel pretty good, you know? And improved memory because of that whole flush of blood that's going in. And the body's no different. The body loves physical activity. And it could actually help decrease the aging process in the cell. So yeah, how it makes sense. If your cells are getting that physical activity, that blood flow, on top of that you're eating healthy, you're stress managing. Now all of a sudden when that cell starts to replicate, it's doing it in a more efficient way. But multiple benefits, from slowing down the aging process, from decreasing muscle fatigue, increasing bone density. You know, that's very important as we get older. The nutrients are now able to get into that cell nicely, and most importantly, remember Mr. Insulin? Now he can work better, because now that cell doesn't have that inflammation anymore, and the body's just working nicely. Good. And you have increased muscle mass, you have increased metabolism, and it improves balance. We take for granted how we can sit and pop out of a chair until there's a day that we cannot do it. Right? So we want to make sure that we're working these muscles so they stay strong. So how do we do this? Behaviors. Remember, circuit. Think about a circuit in your brain. How do I start that? First thing your mindset should be, what will I get out of it? What's important to you? I mentioned a few things there. I mean, if you want more energy, you're going to get it. If you want a stronger body, you're going to get it. And this is you time. So, thank you. So the reason why that's important is because now you're spending time with yourself. You know, you're not exercising for anyone. Yeah, maybe your doctor told you to do it, but you're really doing it for yourself. Okay, so that's me time. And pick something that you enjoy. It always, I find it quite funny when people come and they say, Doc, I did this boot camp, it was horrible. Sense, okay? Because we don't build circuits with negative thoughts. We build circuits feeling good, feeling like, oh, this makes sense, and it actually makes me feel really well, so I want to continue to do it. So you're building a bulletproof habit in a new autopilot. So number one, we want to pick a specific goal. All right, so let's say your goal right now, you're not exercising at all, so your goal should actually be low. You don't want to start too aggressive, okay? So let's say you say, you know what, I'm gonna go for a walk for 10 minutes, 3 days a week. That's a good goal. Choose a simple action that you can do daily, or you have that specific time. Let's say you do it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Okay, so again, very specific with how you're going to do this, and be consistent. You know, even if you don't want to go, you have to make yourself go, because remember, at first it seems a little unnatural, but then once you start to do it over and over again, it kind of feels like a new way of life. So with time, it becomes easier. It's said about 10 weeks, but I really would say that varies from person to person. But the whole point is to make this now kind of an automatic thing. So like, let's say it's easier for you to do this physical activity in the morning, then that way you wake up, you do your physical activity, go home, eat breakfast, and head out to work. So it kind of becomes now a new part of your life. Okay, so how much physical activity is recommended? It's at about 150 minutes per week, a mix of cardiovascular with 2 days of resistance training. And resistance training doesn't mean like in the gym, buffing it up, no. It means you can use your own body weight. You can do Pilates, Tai Chi, yoga, using bands. All of that is considered resistance training. But like I said, if you're not exercising currently, you don't want to start with 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. You want to work your way up to that. Perfect. So in summary, we want to aim for behavior change. Behavior change. Not, oh, I want to lose 30 pounds. No, that's going to follow because you're putting in your time and your efforts to really change that behavior. Eat more plant foods and less processed foods, and find that balance that works for you. Be intentional about being present. Do the whole open the ear thing and the gratitude practice, and see how you feel when you do that. And most importantly, please be kind to yourself. We tend to be very vicious with ourselves, and oh, you need to do this. Why didn't you do it? You could have done it, but you didn't. It's okay. It's not, as I said. For instance, with diabetes, there's millions of people struggling with the same. And people do great. There are people that go into remission. It's definitely possible. And move that body. Like I said, those muscles are not there for accessory.